Part 1. What would you do if you bought your mother a beautiful $600,000 home, and just a few months later, someone walked into that very house, looked at your mother, and called her the maid? I didn't say a single word that day. I quietly tightened my grip on the thick envelope in my pocket, because I already knew that when that envelope was opened, it wouldn't reveal just one secret. It would expose the true faces of everyone in that room. But before we get to that moment, I need to take you back few months. My name is Hamza. I'm 38 years old. But my story really began when I was just a kid. My father was a modest government employee. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. We simply lived an honest life with dignity. Then one day, everything changed. I was only 16 when my father suffered a massive heart attack. The doctors did everything they could, but they couldn't save him. That was the first time I saw my mother completely broken. She never cried in front of us, never once, but late at night, I would often hear her quietly crying alone in her room. My older brother, Faisal, was 5 years older than me. After Dad passed away, I thought he would step up and take responsibility for our family, but he didn't. He looked me in the eye and said, "I can't ruin my own life." Just a few months later, he accepted a job in another city. He called every now and then, but when it came to helping with the bills, Mum's medicine, or my education, he rarely contributed anything. My mother never complained. She always told me, every person writes their own destiny. After college, I got a job at a small IT company. I worked during the day, freelanced at night, and spent every weekend building software projects of my own. 4 years. I never took vacations. I never bought an expensive car. I never wasted money. I had only one dream. One day, I wanted to give my mother a home where she would never worry about paying rent again. A home filled with sunlight. A little garden where she could grow the flowers she loved. After 12 years of non-stop work, my company finally became successful. A large technology firm offered to buy my software. The deal went through. For the first time in my life, my bank account held more money than I had ever imagined. My friends said, "Buy yourself a luxury car." Someone else said, "Get a beachfront penthouse." Another friend told me, "Travel the world." I walked into a real estate office. I looked the agent in the eye and said, "I want a house that will bring tears of happiness to my mother's eyes." After searching for almost 2 months, finally found it. A beautiful 2-story home, built with elegant white stone, in one of the quietest neighborhoods in the city. It had a perfectly manicured front lawn, a peaceful backyard garden, and a spacious kitchen, exactly like the one my mother had dreamed about for years. Price was $600,000. I didn't hesitate for even a second. I completed all the paperwork, signed every document, and bought the house. But I kept one secret. I didn't tell anyone, not even my mother. The day before we moved, I smiled and said, "Mom, be ready tomorrow. I'm taking you somewhere." He smiled back. "You're not taking me to another doctor's appointment, are you?" I laughed. "No, Mom. Not medicine this time. This is a surprise." The next morning, I gently tied a scarf over her eyes. She couldn't stop laughing. "Hamza, are you kidnapping me?" I grinned. "Just 5 more minutes." When the car finally stopped, I helped her out and slowly guided her toward the front door. I unlocked it, opened the door, then carefully removed the blindfold. For several long seconds, she couldn't speak. Her eyes slowly scanned every corner of the house. Then she looked at me. Her voice trembled. "Hamza, whose house is this?" I smiled, placed the keys in her hand, and quietly said, "Mom, it's yours." The next moment, she burst into tears. She wrapped her arms around me and held me tighter than she ever had before. My son. I never even dreamed I would live in a home like this. I hugged her back. This isn't just a house, Mom. It's only a small way. Thank you for every sacrifice you made for us. I could never truly repay. A few weeks later, we officially moved in. The neighbors were kind. My mother was happier than I'd seen her in years. Every morning, she watered the flowers in her little garden. The peace on her face made every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every hour of hard work worth it. For the first time, I truly believed our lives had finally changed. But I had no idea that peace wouldn't last. One evening, my phone rang. It was my older brother, Faisal. His voice was unusually gentle. Hamza, I need a small favor. I stayed quiet and listened. My apartment is being renovated. It'll only take 2 or 3 months. Would it be okay if Sarah and I stayed with Mom for a little while? I didn't answer immediately. Something deep inside me felt uneasy. Then, my mother gently placed her hand on mine. He is your brother, she whispered. The house is big. It's only for a few months. I took a deep breath. Then I nodded. All right. The doors of this home will always be open for family. What I didn't know was that the day I opened that front door for my brother, I was also opening the door to a storm that would change all of our lives forever. The very next week, Faisal and his wife Sarah arrived with all of their belongings. For the first 2 days, everything seemed perfectly normal. Sarah smiled all the time. She would tell my mother, Mom, please sit down. I'll take care of everything. Deep down, I thought maybe I had been worrying for nothing. Maybe she really had changed. On the 3rd day, her true personality began to show. One morning, I was sitting at the breakfast table. Mom was in the kitchen making fresh parathas for everyone. Sarah sat there scrolling through her phone. She glanced at the food, wrinkled her nose, and said, Mom, these parathas are way too greasy. Nobody eats this much oil anymore. Mom immediately replied, All right, dear. I'll boil some eggs instead. Sarah didn't even look up. She simply kept scrolling through her phone. I tried to change the subject, but I noticed the smile on my mother's face had quietly faded. A few days later, I had to leave town for an important business meeting. Before I left, I looked at Sarah and said, Please don't let Mom do too much work. Her back has been bothering her. She smiled warmly. Don't worry. She's my mother too. Hearing that, felt relieved. But that relief lasted only a few hours. At evening, I video called my mother. She didn't answer right away. 5 minutes later, she called me back. The first thing I noticed was the sweat on her forehead. Behind her, the kitchen was a complete mess. Mom, are you okay? She forced a smile. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just cleaning up a little. Before she could say anything else, Sarah's voice echoed from the other room. Mom, don't forget to clean the living room too. My friends will be here soon. Mom immediately answered. Of course, dear. I'll do it right away. I didn't say anything, but something inside me didn't feel right. Before I could ask more questions, Mom quickly changed the subject. You just take care of yourself. Everything's fine here. The following week, my schedule became even busier. I was traveling almost non-stop. While I was away, Sarah slowly began taking control of the entire house. She replaced the furniture in the living room. She took down my mother's favorite curtains. She hung paintings that matched her own taste. She even rearranged the kitchen. When Mom gently said, Dear, I'm used to the old layout, Sarah laughed. Mom, this is a modern house now. You need to let go of the old ways. Faisal saw everything, but every single time, he gave the same answer. Don't upset Sarah. She's just trying to make the house nicer. Mom stayed quiet. She never complained. Not once. One evening, my aunt unexpectedly stopped by. By coincidence, I had returned home that same day. We were all sitting together, drinking tea. My aunt smiled at Mom. "Zoe, you must finally be relaxing now. Such a beautiful house. Life must be comfortable." Before Mom could answer, Sarah laughed. "Relaxing? Not at all. Mom actually enjoys doing the housework. Besides, she sits around all day. She gets bored." My aunt laughed politely and let it go, but I noticed something. My mother quietly lowered her eyes. That night, around midnight, I came downstairs to get a glass of water. The kitchen light was still on. When I walked inside, froze. Mom was standing alone, washing a mountain of dishes. "Mom, what are you doing? It's midnight." She looked startled. "Oh, it's nothing, sweetheart. Just a couple more minutes." I gently took the dishes from her hands. "Who left all of these?" She avoided my eyes. Everyone was tired. I looked around. Expensive dinner plates, dirty wine glasses, serving trays from the party. This wasn't just a few dishes. That moment, Sarah called down from upstairs. "Mom, don't forget my green tea in the morning. And wash my white clothes separately. I don't want the colors to bleed." Lily. I looked toward the staircase. She hadn't noticed I was standing there. She simply turned around and walked back to her bedroom. I looked at my mother. Her eyes were filled with tears. Yet she still whispered, "Let it go, son. It's just family." For the first time, I realized this wasn't just family. It was the beginning of complete disrespect. 2 days later, Sarah announced, "My college friends are coming over next weekend. We're throwing a big party." I simply nodded. "All right." Then she said something that made every alarm bell ring inside my head. "Oh, and while everyone's here, Mom can stay in the kitchen. She enjoys that kind of work anyway." I looked directly into her eyes. She was smiling, but behind that smile, I saw pure arrogance. What I didn't know was that this very party would become the most humiliating day our family had ever experienced. And it would be the day my mother's dignity would be attacked right in front of everyone. The day of the party, the entire house was buzzing with activity from early morning. Fresh, expensive flowers were being delivered. The catering staff arrived with trays of food. Large tables were set up across the backyard lawn. Sarah personally inspected every little detail. Every few minutes, she barked out another order. "Move that table over there. Turn the lights up a little brighter. I don't want those folding chairs showing." She acted like she owned a luxury hotel, even though she didn't own this house at all. Mom had been unusually quiet all morning. She took out her favorite light blue dress. She looked genuinely happy. She smiled at me and asked, "Son, does this look all right?" Smiled back. "Mom, you look beautiful in everything you wear." A gentle smile appeared on her face. It didn't last very long. The moment Sarah saw her, her expression changed. She hurried over. "Mom, where do you think you're going dressed like that?" Mom looked confused. "Dear, I'm just going to sit with everyone during the party." Sarah immediately shook her head. "No, we're expecting some very important guests today. There's also a lot of work in the kitchen. You'll ruin those clothes." Then she opened the closet, pulled out an old plain outfit, and handed it to my mother. "Wear this instead. It's much more appropriate." Mom stood there silently for a few moments. Then she quietly replied, "All right, dear." I witnessed the entire exchange. But just then, my phone rang. A major client was calling for an urgent video meeting. I had no choice. I went upstairs to my home office. I had no idea what was about to happen downstairs. At 7 o'clock that evening, the guests began arriving. Luxury cars lined the street. Sarah's friends, Faisal's acquaintances, business associates, and several influential neighbors. all filled the house. Everyone admired the home. Wow! This place is gorgeous. What an incredible design. So elegant. Sarah smiled proudly at every compliment. But she intentionally left out one important detail. She never told anyone that she hadn't bought this house. One of the women finally asked, "Sarah, when did you and Faisal buy this beautiful home?" Without the slightest hesitation, she answered, "Oh, Faisal worked hard for many years. We finally bought it recently." I was walking downstairs when I heard every single word. I stopped halfway down the staircase. Faisal was standing nearby. He heard it too. He didn't say a word. I told myself, I'll deal with it later. Oh, I stayed silent. A few moments later, Mom walked into the room carrying a large tray. She politely served every guest. Oh, her face was filled with kindness. She welcomed everyone with warmth and respect. One of Sarah's friends smiled and asked, "Sarah, who's that lady?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Sarah. She could have answered with 4 simple words. "She's my mother-in-law." That was all she had to say. But instead, she froze time with a single sentence. She laughed. "Oh, her. She's our maid. She's been with us for years. She takes care of all the housework." A few guests laughed. One man joked, "Well, that explains why the house is so spotless." Another woman smiled. "She seems very hardworking." My mother's hands began to tremble. The serving tray shook. One teacup slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. The entire room went silent. I stood only a few feet away, but all I could hear was one word: "Maid." I looked at my mother. Tears filled her eyes. She didn't defend herself. She didn't say a single word. She quietly bent down and began picking up the broken pieces of the cup. My blood was boiling. I was just about to step forward when Mom looked at me, very gently, with nothing more than her eyes. She whispered, "No, stop." It was the hardest moment of my life, watching my mother be humiliated and forcing myself to remain silent. Sarah thought she had won. She laughed with her guests. She posed for pictures. She carried herself as though she truly owned the house. Faisal remained silent. His silence hurt me even more than Sarah's cruel words. Eventually, the party came to an end. The guests left one by one. Mom quietly returned to the kitchen to wash the dishes. I walked over and gently took her hand. "Mom, what happened today will never happen again." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes and softly said, "Son, save the family if you can. If the relationships survive, that's even better." I squeezed her hand. "Mom, sometimes the only way to save a family is to put an end to injustice." Then I walked straight upstairs into my study. I opened the closet and pulled out a black file. Inside were the deed to the house, the family trust documents, and another legal agreement, one that neither Faisal nor Sarah knew even existed. I picked up my phone and made a call. A familiar voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Hamza." I spoke calmly. "Counselor, it's time. Tomorrow morning, bring every original document to my house." After ending the call, I looked at the file one last time. Then I quietly said to myself, "Today, they called my mother the maid. Tomorrow, they'll find out who really owns this house." That night, the entire house was silent, but inside me, a storm was raging. I kept hearing those 4 words, "She's our maid." Those words weren't just an insult to my mother. They were an insult to the woman who had sacrificed her entire life for both of her sons. That night, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't fight, and I wouldn't let anger push me into doing something I'd regret. This time, the law would speak, not my emotions. The next morning, I sat down at the breakfast table as usual. Sarah was already there. She held a coffee mug in one hand, smiling as if nothing had happened the night before. The moment she saw me, she smiled. "Good morning, Hamza," I answered calmly. "Good morning." She mistook my silence for weakness. A few minutes later, Mom walked in carrying breakfast. I immediately stood up, took the tray from her hands, and helped her into a chair. "Mom, today you're going to eat breakfast. Someone else can do the work." Sarah quickly laughed. "Oh, come on. She's used to doing these things." For the first time, I looked directly into her eyes. There's a difference between habit and being taken advantage of. The room fell silent. Faisal immediately tried to change the subject. "Let's not ruin the morning over something so small." I calmly replied. "The morning isn't what's ruined. That happened yesterday." The moment breakfast ended, the doorbell rang. I walked over and opened the front door. Standing outside was a man in his mid-50s. He wore a black suit and carried a leather briefcase. "Good morning, Mr. Hamza." I smiled and shook his hand. "Good morning, counselor. Please come in." Sarah looked at Faisal. "Who is that?" He shrugged. "I have no idea." A few moments later, we were all seated in the living room. The attorney placed his briefcase on the coffee table. Slowly, he removed a thick brown envelope. Then he looked at me. "Shall I begin?" He nodded. "Please." Sarah laughed. "What is this? Some kind of drama?" I didn't answer. The attorney opened the first folder. "This is the original deed to the house." He placed the document on the table. Faisal quickly picked it up. His eyes stopped on one line. "Owner, Hamza Ahmed." He looked at me in disbelief. "What? This house belongs to you." I answered calmly. "Did I ever tell you it belonged to you?" Sarah immediately interrupted. "But Mom never told us." Mom quietly replied. "You never asked, dear." The attorney opened another folder. "And now, the important document." Sarah leaned back in her chair. She still looked completely relaxed. She was convinced this was all just a formality. Her expression suddenly changed. The attorney began reading. "This property is registered under a family protection trust." Faisal frowned. "What does that mean?" The attorney adjusted his glasses. "It means this house exists for one purpose: to provide a safe and permanent home for Mrs. Nazreen. No other resident has any ownership rights." Sarah rolled her eyes. "So what? We never claimed ownership." The attorney turned to the next page. "Please allow me to finish." The room became completely silent. He continued reading. "If any guest residing in this property causes emotional distress, harms the dignity, disrupts the peace, or subjects the primary resident, Mrs. Nazreen, to humiliation, intimidation, or domestic pressure, the trustee has the legal authority to terminate that person's right to remain in the home, effective immediately." Sarah sat up straight. "What kind of joke is this?" The attorney answered without emotion. "This isn't a joke. It's a legally binding agreement, signed when the property was purchased." Faisal hurriedly flipped through the documents. Sweat appeared across his forehead. For the first time, he realized this situation was far more serious than he had ever imagined. I quietly watched everyone. They still hadn't seen my strongest evidence, 'cause the deed was only the beginning. The real decision was still waiting. I looked at my attorney. He understood immediately. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a small USB flash drive, and placed it gently on the table. Sarah frowned. "What's that?" For the first time, I allowed myself a small smile. "That is the truth. The truth you never even tried to hide." Sarah looked at me, completely confused. She still had no idea that the videos stored on that tiny USB drive had recorded every order she gave, every insult she made, every moment she humiliated my mother over the past several weeks. And once those videos started playing, even Faisal would finally see the real woman he had married. The living room was so quiet. You could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. The tiny USB flash drive, lying on the coffee table, suddenly seemed far more powerful than all of Sarah's confidence. She forced a smile. Hamza, you're really making a huge deal out of something so small. I answered calmly. Something small. My mother's dignity will never be something small to me. The attorney opened his laptop. He plugged in the USB drive. A moment later, the television lit up. Faisal shifted nervously in his chair. What's on it? I looked at him. The truth. Just one word. Carried more weight than the entire house. The first video began. Date was from 2 months earlier. It was footage from the security camera above the kitchen door. Mom was quietly washing dishes. Sarah walked in. She dropped another stack of dirty plates onto the counter. Without even looking at Mom, she said, "Mom, wash these too. I don't want to ruin my manicure." Mom smiled gently. "Of course, dear." The video ended. Sarah immediately spoke up. "What's wrong with that?" She offered to do it. I remained silent. The second video played. Mom was sweeping the staircase. Sarah was talking to one of her friends on the phone. She said, "If you have an older person living with you, you don't even need a maid." Her friend's laughter echoed through the recording. Mom heard every word. But she didn't respond. She simply kept cleaning. Faisal lowered his eyes. The third video appeared. It had been recorded only a few days earlier. Mom was suffering from severe back pain. She was resting on the couch. Sarah walked over, placed a large basket of laundry in front of her, and said, "Mom, these clothes need to be washed before tonight." Mom answered softly, "Dear, my back really hurts today." Sarah shrugged. "Everyone has pain. Work still has to get done." The video stopped. Faisal slowly turned toward his wife. His voice barely escaped. "You actually said that." Sarah quickly defended herself. "You know how videos are. They never show the full story." The attorney calmly replied, "Don't worry. We have the full recording." He clicked the next file. This time, the audio was even clearer. Sarah was sitting in the living room with 2 of her friends. She said, "This house is basically ours now anyway. Hamza is hardly ever home. Mom, well, she'll do whatever you ask." One of her friends asked, "What if he tells you to leave someday?" Sarah burst into laughter. "Me? Leave this house? Have you met Faisal? He'd never take anyone else's side over mine." Silence filled the room. The color drained from Faisal's face. He quietly asked, "When was this recorded?" 10 days ago. Answered. The attorney played the final video. Party. That same night. That same unforgettable moment. A guest smiled and asked, "Sarah, who's that lady?" Sarah's voice echoed through the room. "Oh, her. She's our maid." The video froze. Nobody spoke. Mom sat quietly. Her eyes once again filled with tears. I reached over and gently held her hand. Several long moments passed. Then Faisal slowly stood up. He turned toward Sarah. His voice shook. "Tell me one thing. Was all of this a lie? Or have I been blind this entire time?" Sarah's confidence finally cracked. "Faisal, I was only joking." For the first time, I raised my voice. "Joking. A mother's dignity is never a joke." Sarah was beginning to panic. She suddenly turned toward me. "You put cameras inside the house. That's illegal." The attorney answered before I could. "Incorrect. This is private property. Every security camera was legally installed and registered." There are clear surveillance notices posted at every entrance. Sarah fell silent. She had no argument left. I picked up the thick envelope from the table. Lily opened it. It was another legal document. I handed it to my attorney. He took a deep breath, looked directly at Sarah, and spoke. Mrs. Sarah, the videos were only evidence. The legal action begins now. She swallowed hard. What legal action? The attorney placed the document on the table. This is your official notice to vacate the property. The moment those words left his mouth, both Sarah and Faisal turned completely pale. But neither of them realized that the eviction notice was only the beginning. Within the next 24 hours, even more secrets were about to come crashing down. The moment the legal notice was placed on the table, the entire room fell silent. Faisal stared at the document over and over again. It was as if he couldn't believe that the house he had slowly begun to think of as his own had never belonged to him at all. Suddenly, Sarah grabbed the notice and threw it back onto the table. I don't accept this. Her voice echoed through the room. We've been living here for 2 months. You can't just throw us out. The attorney answered calmly. You're mistaken. You're not tenants. You were given temporary permission to stay here. And that permission has officially been revoked. Sarah turned to Faisal. Say something. But he remained silent. For the first time, he had nothing left to say. Mom quietly spoke. Hamza, if they apologize, maybe. I gently took her hand. Mom, an apology only matters when it comes from genuine remorse, not from desperation. Sarah immediately fired back. I don't owe anyone an apology. For the first time, smiled. Not out of anger, but certainty. That's all right. Then we'll let the law do its job. The attorney glanced at his watch. According to the notice, you have 48 hours to vacate the property. During that time, you may remove only your personal belongings. No furniture, no decorations, no valuables belonging to the home. Sarah laughed sarcastically. What valuables? We don't need anything from your house. I didn't respond. That moment, the front door opened. An elderly gardener walked inside. His name was Kareem. He had worked alongside my mother for nearly 15 years. Respectfully, he handed me a folder. Sir, this is the file you requested. I thanked him and accepted it. Sarah crossed her arms. Now what's in that? I slowly opened the folder. It was a complete record of every expense related to the house. One by one, I placed the papers on the table. Electricity bills, water bills, internet service, groceries, garden maintenance, housekeeping expenses. Then I looked directly at Faisal. Do you know that over the last 3 months, you didn't pay a single one of these? He lowered his head because he knew it was true. Every payment had come from my bank account. I turned another page. And here's the insurance for your car. Faisal looked up in surprise. You paid that too? He nodded. Yes, even when you told me money was tight. I didn't say a word. I pulled out another receipt. Your son's school tuition. Another page. Sarah's health club membership. Another. The new kitchen appliances. Every payment had been made by me. Mom looked at me, completely stunned. In a soft voice, she asked, Son, why didn't you ever tell me? Smiled. Because I don't keep score when I help family. The moment someone mistakes generosity for entitlement, it's time to show the receipts. Sarah no longer sounded confident. You did all of this just to humiliate us. I slowly shook my head. No, I did it for my brother. You treated every act of kindness like it was something you deserved. For the first time, Faisal broke down. He covered his face with both hands. Hamza, I honestly had no idea. You were doing all this for us. I took a deep breath. You never tried to find out. Those words hit him harder than anything else I had said that day. The room fell silent again. For a moment, everyone believed it was finally over. But I knew the biggest truth hadn't been revealed yet. I reached into the folder Kareem had brought me. From inside, I removed a small white envelope. Across the front, someone had written just one sentence. Open only in case of emergency. Faisal frowned. What is that? I held the envelope in my hand and quietly answered. These are your mother's written instructions that she entrusted to me 1 year ago. And after you hear what's inside, you'll finally understand what she truly feared for this family. Sarah's face turned pale. For the first time, she realized this was never just a fight over a house. It was a battle over trust and the truth that had been buried for years. The room was completely silent. Faisal, Mum, and the attorney were all staring at the white envelope in my hand. It wasn't an ordinary envelope. Across the front, written in my mother's own handwriting, was a single sentence. If my children ever lose respect for one another, read this letter. I slowly opened it. It was a neatly folded letter. Along with it were my mother's signed written instructions. I unfolded the pages. For a brief moment, even my voice faltered. I began to read. My beloved sons, if you are reading this letter, then my greatest fear has finally come true. I was never afraid of losing money. I was always afraid of losing love. Hamza, from childhood you sacrificed your own happiness. And Faisal, you have always been a piece of my heart, even when life took you far away from me. I have never loved one of you more than the other. The room remained silent. No one interrupted. Continued. If anyone ever makes me feel like a burden, or takes away my dignity inside this home, then I would not want to spend even a single day living there. Tears rolled down my mother's face. She lowered her head. I turned to the next page. Faisal, if you are hearing these words, remember one thing for the rest of your life. A silent person is not always innocent. Sometimes, silence becomes the greatest form of cruelty. The moment those words were read aloud, Faisal broke down. He buried his face in his hands, crying uncontrollably. I unfolded the final page. Only one paragraph remained. And if one day, Hamza has to make a difficult decision to protect my dignity, then he does not need my permission. And he should never apologize for doing what is right. I lowered the letter. The room fell into complete silence. Several long moments passed. Faisal slowly stood. He walked over to Mom, dropped to his knees beside her, and sobbed. Mom, please forgive me. I never wanted to hurt you. Mom gently rested her hand on his head. My son, pain isn't always caused by someone's hands. Sometimes, it's caused by their silence. Those words shattered him. His shoulders shook as he cried. Every eye in the room turned toward Sarah. She sat frozen in her chair. For the first time, fear was written across her face. She still refused to admit she was wrong. In a quiet voice, she muttered, I didn't do anything that terrible. Everyone is exaggerating. I took a slow breath. Sarah, you still don't understand. The problem wasn't just the word maid. The problem was, you stripped away the dignity of the woman whose sacrifices made this family possible. Sarah said nothing, and suddenly, she jumped to her feet. That's enough. You keep blaming everything on me. Faisal stayed silent too. Why am I the only one paying the price? I answered calmly. The difference is simple. Faisal has accepted responsibility. You're still trying to prove that you did nothing wrong. The attorney glanced at his watch. Mrs. Sarah, you now have 47 hours remaining. She frowned. What do you mean? The eviction notice is already in effect. The countdown has begun. Sarah angrily grabbed her handbag. Fine. We'll leave. But one day, you're going to regret this decision. For the first time. I smiled without anger. I only regret one thing. That I allowed my mother's humiliation to continue for so many months. She returned and stormed upstairs. Faisal remained exactly where he was. Mom quietly wiped away her tears. For a moment, I thought it was finally over. Then, the front door burst open. Old Kareem hurried inside, breathing heavily. In his hands was a small velvet jewelry box. Sir, he gasped. I found this box in the bedroom closet. But, I looked at him. But what? His voice trembled. The family diamond necklace. The one your late father left for Madam. It's gone. The room froze. Every heartbeat seemed to stop. Halfway up the staircase, Sarah stood perfectly still. And for the very first time, the color completely drained from her face. Not with anger, but with fear. Old Kareem's words still echoed through the room. The necklace is missing. Mom slowly rose from her chair. Her voice trembled. Which necklace? Kareem answered softly. The diamond necklace. The one your late husband gave you. On your 50th birthday. The color drained from Mom's face. She sat back down, holding onto the chair for support. I haven't even touched it. In years. Sarah froze halfway up the staircase. Then she suddenly raised her voice. Why is everyone looking at me? Am I going to be blamed every time something goes missing? I answered calmly. No one has mentioned your name. She immediately fell silent. The panic on her face said more than words ever could. The attorney turned toward Kareem. When was the last time anyone saw the necklace? He thought for a moment. About 3 months ago. When Mrs. Sarah. He stopped speaking. Sarah quickly interrupted. Yes, I looked at it. I didn't steal it. I looked directly at her. Kareem hadn't even finished his sentence. Her lips suddenly went dry. Faisal stared at his wife. You opened Mom's closet. Sarah avoided his eyes. Mom asked me to. Mom immediately shook her head. No, dear. I never asked you to. Silence returned once again. I calmly said. Counselor. The next file. Sarah frowned. What file now? The attorney opened his briefcase. He removed another folder. Across the cover were the words, Security Log and Inventory Report. Faisal looked confused. What is this? I answered. When I bought this house, I didn't just install security cameras. I also created complete inventory of every valuable item inside. The attorney turned several pages. According to this report, the family necklace was removed from the closet 3 months ago. Sarah immediately shrugged. So what? He opened another page. And according to the upstairs bedroom security footage, the necklace was never seen being returned to the jewelry box. Sarah's breathing became noticeably faster. I looked at the attorney. Play the video. The television came to life. The footage showed Mom leaving her bedroom. A few minutes later, Sarah quietly walked inside. She opened the closet, removed the jewelry box, picked up the diamond necklace. She stood in front of the mirror, trying it on. Hearing footsteps outside, she quickly closed the jewelry box. Because of the camera angle, it wasn't clear whether she had actually returned the necklace. The video ended. Sarah immediately let out a sigh of relief. See, the video doesn't prove I took anything. He nodded. You're right. It only proves That you entered Mom's room, opened her closet, and handled her jewelry without permission. Faisal turned toward her. You hid this from me too. She quickly answered. I was only trying it on. The attorney quietly closed the folder. Then he looked at me. Understood. It was finally time. I walked over to Mom, held her hand, and smiled. Mom, don't worry. She looked at me in confusion. Why? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small silver key. Because the necklace was never stolen. Every head in the room turned toward me. Even Sarah looked stunned. What do you mean? I calmly explained. 2 months ago, when I realized the atmosphere in this house was changing, I moved every family heirloom into a secure bank safety deposit box. Mom stared at me. You didn't even tell me. I smiled gently. I didn't want you to worry. Then I turned toward Sarah. The necklace is perfectly safe. But today, something much more important has been proven. You entered Mom's private room, opened her closet without permission, handled family heirlooms, and kept it hidden, even from your own husband. Sarah had nothing left to say. Not a single word. After a long silence, Faisal looked at me. His eyes were filled with regret. Hamza, understand now. You never wanted to punish us. You only wanted to protect Mom's dignity. For the first time, I looked directly into my brother's eyes. I just wish you had understood that the day Sarah called Mom, the maid. That exact moment, Sarah's cell phone rang. She glanced at the screen. The color disappeared from her face. All over again. Her hands began to shake. I caught a brief glimpse of the caller's name and quietly thought to myself, Zoe, the last person involved, has finally decided to call. Sarah's hands were visibly shaking. She quickly tried to silence her phone. I had already seen the name on the screen. Cameron, real estate agent. Something immediately felt wrong. If Faisal and Sarah were only supposed to be staying in the house temporarily, why was a real estate agent calling her repeatedly? I calmly said, Answer the phone, Sarah. She swallowed nervously. I'll call him back later. I looked her straight in the eyes. No, answer it. Right here. In front of everyone. Once again, the room fell silent. After several tense seconds, she reluctantly put the call on speaker. A cheerful voice came through. Hello, ma'am. Congratulations. I found a buyer who's willing to pay your asking price. Every bit of color disappeared from Sarah's face. She quickly interrupted. You've got the wrong number. It was already too late. The agent continued, No, ma'am. I'm talking about that beautiful white 2-story house. The one you sent me all those pictures of. The buyer would like to come see it next week. The room became so quiet. It felt as if time itself had stopped. Faisal slowly stood up. What house? The agent answered. Sir. The one madam told me belonged to her. Sarah instantly ended the call. Everyone had already heard enough. Faisal stared at her. His voice shook with anger. Sarah, were you trying to sell this house? She stammered. No, I was only what? His voice grew louder. Answer me. After several long seconds, she whispered. I was only trying to find out how much it was worth. Without saying a word, I placed my phone on the coffee table. Really? I unlocked the screen. Every email between Sarah and the real estate agent was there. Photos of every room in the house. The backyard, the kitchen, the bedrooms, everything. Faisal saw one particular message. It read, The owner is usually out of town, so we should be able to move quickly. His hands began to shake. He scrolled through every message. Every word broke him a little more. Finally, he looked up. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Is this true? Sarah didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any confession. Mom spoke softly. Son, were they really trying to sell my home? I gently held her hand. No, Mom. That could never happen. Legally, this house cannot be sold unless both I and the trust's attorney approve the transaction. Mom let out a long breath of relief. Then I turned to Faisal. Now do you understand why I protected everything through legal documents from the very beginning? He slowly lowered his head. Hamza, my silence cost me my family. Sarah suddenly burst into tears. I got greedy. I made a terrible mistake. I convinced myself that one day this house would belong to us. I never imagined it would end like this. I answered quietly. A person's true character is revealed when they're given power. You were only given a roof over your head for a short time, but you immediately started acting like the owner. The attorney quietly closed his file. Mrs. Sarah, the eviction notice remains in effect. You and Mr. Faisal must vacate the property by tomorrow evening. Faisal simply nodded. He didn't argue, not once. Just then, Mom slowly stood up. She walked over to him, placed her hand gently on his head, and said, My son, this door will always remain open if you return as my son, not as the owner. Those words broke him completely. He embraced her and cried like a little boy. The next afternoon, a small moving truck was parked outside the house. Faisal quietly loaded his belongings. Sarah carried boxes without saying a single word. For the first time, the pride that had always filled her face had been replaced by shame. The story wasn't over yet, because just as they were about to leave, Mom made a decision that surprised even me. Outside the house, a small moving truck waited by the curb. Faisal quietly placed the last cardboard box into the back. Sarah turned around and looked one last time at the beautiful white two-story home. Just a few months earlier, she had imagined herself as its owner. Today, she was leaving as nothing more than a guest. Inside the house, Mom stood by the window. Tears filled her eyes. I walked over and gently asked, Mom, are you all right? She smiled through the tears. A mother is never happy watching her children leave. I didn't answer. I knew that despite everything, her heart still held the same love for Faisal. A few moments later, Mom stepped outside. The instant Faisal saw her, he dropped to his knees. He cried uncontrollably. Mom, I failed you. If it's possible, please forgive me. Mom gently rested her hand on his head. I forgave you. Today, you admitted you were wrong. Faisal looked up in disbelief. You really did. Mom smiled softly. A mother's heart doesn't hold on to hatred. It never forgets the lesson. Sarah stood a few steps away. Her eyes remained fixed on the ground. Slowly, she walked toward Mom. Her voice trembled. Mom, I know that saying I'm sorry can't erase the pain I caused. I was arrogant, I was greedy, and my greatest mistake was failing to respect you. Tears streamed down her face. If you can't forgive me, I won't blame you. Mom looked at her quietly for several long moments. Then she spoke. My daughter, asking for forgiveness is easy. Changing is the difficult part. If you've truly changed, then you've already been forgiven. Sarah broke down. She gently kissed Mom's hands and sobbed. I watched silently. For the first time in months, the weight inside my own heart began to disappear. I walked over to Faisal and placed a hand on his shoulder. Brother, he looked at me. This house belongs to Mom. Today, tomorrow, and always. But there is one rule for anyone who enters this home. He nodded. What is it? I looked toward Mom and smiled. Anyone who walks through that front door must first respect the woman who built this family. Without hesitation, Faisal nodded. I promise. I'll never stand by in silence again. I reached out and shook his hand. That's the only promise I ever wanted. A few days later, Faisal and Sarah rented a small house on the other side of town. Faisal picked up extra work. Sarah found a full-time job. For the first time, they were building a life through their own effort. 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. Open the door. Standing outside were Faisal, Ura, and their little son. Sarah carried Mom's favorite white roses. Faisal held a container of homemade food. They walked inside. This time, Sarah went straight to the kitchen. She smiled and said, Mom, today you rest. I'm cooking. Mom smiled warmly. For the first time, I looked into Sarah's eyes and saw not pride, but humility. At evening, we all sat together in the garden. Mom watered her flowers. The peaceful smile on her face was exactly the reason I had bought this house. All those years ago, she looked at me and quietly said, Hamza, you didn't just give me a home. You gave me back my dignity. I gently held her hand. Mom, money can buy a house, but it takes respect to make it a home. That day, I learned something I'll never forget. Money, cars, mansions, and property can all be earned again. The moment a mother's dignity disappears, a house becomes nothing more than bricks and walls, and the home where a mother is honored will always be closest thing to heaven on earth. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments if you were in Hamza's place. Would you have made the same decision? Your thoughts and opinions mean a lot to us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.